Climate agreements, trade frameworks, development banks, and environmental treaties function as the operating system of sustainability by coordinating investment, managing shared risks, and distributing resources across borders. When geopolitical rivalries weaken these institutions or policy priorities toward military confrontation and economic fragmentation, the entire sustainability framework becomes unstable. The present conflict in the Middle East therefore illustrates the systemic danger the WCED anticipated nearly 4 decades ago. When multilateral cooperation collapses, environmental protection, economic stability, and social development unravel together. Sustainable development ultimately depends not only on technology or environmental policy, but on political commitment to international cooperation capable of managing the shared risks of an interconnected world. What appears at first to be a geopolitical dispute suddenly becomes a sustainability issue. A similar dynamic unfolded during the pandemic when global supply chains seized up. For decades, companies had optimized production networks around just-in-time logistics. Factories minimized inventory in order to reduce costs. Shipping routes were designed for maximum efficiency. But when lockdowns halted manufacturing hubs and containers accumulated in the wrong ports, the entire system struggled to recover. Electronic shipments stalled, automobile production slowed, retail shelves emptied. These events did not destroy the global economy. They revealed something critical. Systems optimized solely for efficiency often lack the buffers required to absorb shocks. Taleb and the logic of antifragility. The risk scholar Nassim Nicholas Taleb provides a useful framework for understanding these dynamics. Taleb argues that the systems respond to volatility in 3 different ways. Fragile systems break when exposed to stress. Robust systems resist stress, but remain fundamentally unchanged. Anti-fragile systems, however, improve because of stress. They adapt, reorganize, and emerge stronger. This concept of anti-fragility is particularly relevant to sustainability because the 21st century is likely to be characterized by increasing volatility. Climate events, geopolitical conflict, technological disruption, and financial instability all introduce stress into the systems that support modern life. The challenge facing modern societies is therefore not merely to avoid shocks. It is to design systems capable of functioning under stress and ideally becoming stronger as a result. Boomers, the builders of the asset era. To understand how sustainability debates evolved, it helps to examine how different generations experience the systems we now depend on. The baby boomer generation came of age during an extraordinary period of economic expansion. Following the Second World War, industrialized economies embarked on large-scale reconstruction and infrastructure development. Energy was abundant and inexpensive. Manufacturing expanded rapidly. Governments invested heavily in highways, housing, and public education. In both Canada and the United States, home ownership became a central pathway to economic security. Wages rose steadily, allowing many families to purchase homes relatively early in their careers. Property values increased over time, generating substantial household wealth. For this generation, the economic system appeared to function largely as a meritocracy. Education led to employment, employment enabled homeownership, and homeownership created financial stability. Yet, the very success of this model gradually introduced structural tensions. In Canada, Residential real estate eventually became the largest component of household wealth. As urban populations grew and land became scarce in major cities such as Toronto and Vancouver, housing prices accelerated dramatically. Over time, entry into the housing market increasingly depended on access to HIP rather than simply income. This shift laid the groundwork for what British analyst Eliza Filby has described as inheritocracy, a system in which economic opportunity increasingly depends on inherited wealth rather than earned income. The Gen X, the shock absorbers. Gen X entered adulthood during a period of economic restructuring. Globalization intensified competition, manufacturing employment declined in many regions, pension structures shifted away from defined benefit plans towards defined contribution models. This generation often found itself navigating multiple forms of pressure simultaneously. Many supported aging parents while raising children of their own. Housing prices continued to rise, and financial leverage became a more prominent feature of household economics. Infrastructure fragility also became increasingly visible during this period. In both Canada and the United States, engineering assessments repeatedly warned that public infrastructure was deteriorating faster than governments were repairing it. Bridges constructed in the mid-20th century approached the end of their design life. Rail corridors experienced bottlenecks. Aging water systems required extensive modernization. When a rail bridge fails or a highway corridor closes due to structural concerns, the consequences ripple far beyond the immediate location. Freight shipments stall, agricultural exports are delayed, and entire supply chains experience disruption. These events demonstrate that sustainability is not simply about environmental policy. It is about whether foundational systems remain reliable under stress. Millennials, the transitional generation. Millennials entered the workforce during a dramatically different economic landscape. Many completed their education just as the global financial crisis of 2008 unfolded. Wage growth slowed in many sectors, while housing prices continued to escalate. For this generation, the promise of meritocracy began to feel less certain. Few individuals with identical education and professional qualifications could experience dramatically different economic outcomes, depending on whether they receive financial assistance from family. This dynamic reflects the growing influence of inheritocracy. Access to housing, and therefore access to the largest asset class in modern economics, increasingly depends on intergenerational transfers of wealth. Canada and the United States illustrate this phenomenon in slightly different ways. In the United States, wealth inequality is numerically more extreme at the top of the distribution. The top 1% controls a larger share of national wealth than in Canada. However, Canadian housing markets in major cities have become among the least affordable in the developed world, creating unique barriers to entry for younger households. Millennials therefore confront a paradox. Sustainability policies often focus on technologies that require asset ownership, such as rooftop solar installations or electric vehicles. Yet the individuals most likely to benefit from these incentives are those who already possess substantial assets. The Gen Zs, the volatility generation. Generation Z grew up in an environment defined by volatility. Climate-related events such as wildfires, floods, and extreme heat have become more frequent. Digital technologies accelerate the spread of information and amplify awareness of global crises. Economic shocks and geopolitical conflicts appear with increasing regularity for this generation. For this generation, the assumption that systems will remain stable indefinitely feels less convincing. Wildfire smoke drifts from Canadian forests into major U.S. cities, provides a vivid illustration of this interconnectedness. Floods that damage transportation corridors in British Columbia can disrupt supply chains across North America. Insurance companies withdrawing coverage from high-risk regions reveal the economic implications of climate exposure. Gen Z increasingly interprets sustainability through the lens of risk distribution. Who bears the cost of environmental disruption? Who possesses the resources to adapt? These questions intersect with the broader issue of inheritocracy. Wealth does not merely determine who owns property, it also determines who can relocate, who can reinforce infrastructure, and who can absorb economic shocks. Gen Alpha, the system inheritors. The youngest generation alive today will inherit systems already under strain. They will inherit energy infrastructure undergoing transition, financial systems managing unprecedented debt levels, and geopolitical dynamics that challenge long-standing alliances. Their experience will depend heavily on whether the systems designed today endure and allow them to meet their future needs. If this conversation resonated, you can subscribe to Sustainably SAJe wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes explore sustainability with nuance, without guilt, hype, or greenwashing. Thank you. I'm Shelly Ann John.